The paradox of life. Da, 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 da. Today we are talking about a shifting board and the dialectic. Okay. How is everyone? I hope you guys are doing. Okay. So let's talk about the paradox of life, or the dialectic. Now, if you look up dialectic, it's going to basically say the dialectic is a conversation, right? So this is a conversation of one side versus the other. So this is the one side, and this is the other side. Two sides, right here. And they're going to meet in the middle, and they're going to clash, right here. We see that. Republican, Democratic, right, left, Christians, Muslims, all the way right. Black, right, soccer, basketball, Messi, Ronaldo, all those things. And what happens is, when exploring the dialectic, the objective is not to be right. It is not about being right. It is about discovering the truth. And so, as a practical life skill, one of the best things, if you're going to take one thing from this video, one of the best things that has come to serve me well and that I've seen serve others is oftentimes when we're having a conversation or you're having an interaction or you're doing anything, the biggest thing to ask yourself is, what am I trying to do here? Am I trying to be right, or am I trying to find the truth? Because what happens, and then if you're having a conversation with somebody else, you ask them, are they trying to be right? Are they trying to prove? Or are they trying to discover the truth? Because the intention behind these will lead to very different conversations, right? When we try to be right, this is what's called a debate, right? And some forms of debating might look like what you would call a dialectical conversation or a discovery of the truth. And so debate is a way of getting to the truth. But for this instance, we're just going to use the word debate when you're trying to prove yourself right. Versus here, when we talk about truth, this is more of a conversation. This is a conversation. And the important part about having this conversation is that you're trying to understand the truth of it. So then how do we define truth? And this is the paradox of life, right? Because in life, we're often given opposing viewpoints. And the reason the universe, life, have you, is giving you opposing viewpoints is so that you will discover the truth, which is oftentimes somewhere in the middle between both of them. And so this is a very different way of thinking and approaching life. But it oftentimes will create a coherent narrative. The idea is that as we move from truth, rather than say external stimulus, right? So here you have truth, which oftentimes starts in the inner world, right? When you go to the external, it'll be very chaotic. So let's say, for instance, your job is used as an indicator of progress. Then you lose your job. Then, or actually in the external, let's take a very practical life, right? So someone starts and they live with their parents, right? And then from living with their parents, they then go to school. And then at school, they then find maybe the teachers who are another authority figures, but then very quickly they begin to form friendships. And then those friendships take precedent. And then after friendships, you might go to, say, more schooling, or let's call it education. I know schooling is education, but let's say this is like job education, right? And then after job education, you get your job. And after that, let's say you get married, right? So then you have your marriage. And then after you have your marriage, you have like your partner, you have kids, and then you have a home, right? And then from that home, you then work your job, marriage, kids. And this is the track, right? This is the track in the Western world most people are told to live, is the idea: go to school when you're live with your parents, go to school, get good with your teachers, make friendships, go educate yourself, get a job, then get married, find a find a partner, then get married, right? That's flip. But you find a partner, you get married, then you have kids, then you have a home, and then after that, that's it. And this is the journey, right? And the idea is that if you do this journey right here, you've somehow succeeded, like you've made it. Like this is the journey you're supposed to live out. But how many of our lives actually work like this? Because what happens, say, is you go through and say you go through a divorce, right? So let me actually flip this out. So if you have a partner in the marriage, but then say you have something unexpected, or at this time should probably be expected because divorce is so damn common, right? But let's say between here, now you have a divorce. So now in the effort to divorce, most people start trying to then get this piece back, right? But now they have kids, but then their home, because they got divorced, totally gets wrapped up. So now they're living alone in some apartment. And now you have these three elements. So then some people stay in this part of life and they're just trying their best to get a job part of life. Or let's say you have a job. Let's say in another scenario, you have your marriage, family, kids, but now you've lost your job, right? So now you have to go back to get an education and you're lonely all the time. So now you get friends, right? So this guy could have a job loss, right? Or the loss of an industry. So now you've lost your job, you have to go get education, and you have to be parents. Or another scenario, this is a very common scenario, is now you have someone, say, who has been unable to find a partner, right? They are struggling to find good work, but don't they don't have friendships or education. How many people do we know like this, right? And then so now they're stuck in this phase of life, and these people you might call undeveloped, right? We'll give them that label, undeveloped. And so now they're going back to their primary care, school, teachers, all this stuff. And you might say, well, in the story of life, in this linear pattern, right? This is the where. So people who haven't figured this stuff out, they're nonsense or whatever. But what happens if, say, someone's story was their parents died when they were very young, right? And so because of that, their school was disrupted. So they never really had school or teachers. So now they have to jump down here. Well, naturally they would lean on friendships, but because they never had parents or anything like that, they don't necessarily know how to have good friends. And so, because let's say I know a girl like this, right? So she's not really good at making friends, so she jumps into partnership. So now she's skipping all these steps. She goes from not having parents, where her base foundation of life is here, her partner, right here, right? None of this other stuff. And so, based off of her partner, she then finds a job. And then we start seeing that it's not this linear fashion. You can start building a lot of these elements, you can start building and creating elements from the loss or the absence of the other. Because most people don't have this perfect linear progression. Most people don't. So this is now where we start getting into the truth of the matter, right? Because the truth is a matter of evolution. And one thing I like to say is that the truth oftentimes is based in a narrative. Now, again, obviously, all this is just my perspective, right? That's why you're here exploring this channel, to get my perspective. Like I know everything, because I do. I know everything. I'm a genius, but not really. Anyway, so we see that the truth of the matter, right, is our life can look like parents, child, family, home, parental job loss, usually emotional dependency of the parents on the child. That's super common, right? And there's so many elements you can have. And then from that emotional dependency, they then learn how to have separation, Or actually in the between, let's have rebellion, right? Because the child doesn't want to be the emotional crutch for the parents. So they move into rebellion, they move into separation. This is forced independence, right? And then after from that forced independence, you now have financial instability. So job training is one path, right? But then you could also have uh, partner couple, like a partner coupling. Or let's say you have roommates. Now this is what I would call a decision branch, because this is kind of how like life looks. So life might look linear when you're young, right there or whatever. Now recognize every single point in life operates this way. But here, from now you have the partner coupling, you have job training because of financial instability. You now, let's say you need to find a place to stay. You can find roommates, you work on job training to increase your job training, or you have a partner coupling, or you have a combination of the three. But what happens is we start seeing life rather than this linear progression based in the external world of what we have and don't have. You see that every single point in our life is based upon the internal narrative we have within our life, right? And this is actually more representative of what's going on in each of our heads. And so and in our hearts, because as we go from training to training and all these different points, we oftentimes will get into these patterns. And let's say when you come down to partner coupling, this is where you now might be like, well, what's a good partner? What's a toxic partner? And then you have this bundle of lessons right here, that there's all these lessons you need to learn. And then in job training, let's say there's certain programs or habits you need to get, right? And then here for roommates, also same thing. You have to have communication, right? It's just communication. And so what happens is that now we go on these little side quests to master these habits and these abilities. And then as we go from there, we then move to the next checkpoint in our learning. And the idea behind the truth, right, versus these external things is each of these things, these elements, these external elements are going to move in and out of our way to facilitate the next place of growth, right? Because that's the universe's ultimate idea, is that it's trying to lead to growth, which is why we think, okay, well, if I'm growing, it's going to be this perfectly linear all the way up and down or whatever. But the universe is seeing it in a sense of wholeness. It wants us to be able to not only see certain situations, but be able to adapt and work with situations and excel in each of them. And so oftentimes by doing that, it'll place us in situations where almost it's the principle of almost natural selection, where once you're placed in a situation, the idea is that you're just going to be forced to grow through it. And so in thinking in the dialectic, the idea is that what creates growth is not the external progression. Oh my God, that doesn't. So this blue part, I don't think that blue marker is doing it. I think he's retired. I got to retire the blue marker. So here we look at this sort of linear progression as growth. But in the universe, growth is oftentimes symbolized through tension, right? And it's through that dialectic of the universe and the paradox of life that oftentimes to make us grow, it will create obstacles, right? So as we get older, right, here, nobody has getting sick or getting cancer in this, right? Nobody has losing a loved one or losing a friend upon that. But these things happen in the real world within the truth. And through that, we then learn lessons about our faith, our commitments to joy, our commitments to living a good life. We have a lot of scares, and these elements come in and out of our lives because what the universe is always ultimately trying to do is create tension. And that tension comes through the paradox of wanting and knowing that I need to live a happy life, but also recognizing that I have to learn how to deal with elements that don't necessarily make me happy. So it's learning how to detach from those external elements while at the same time still engaging with them, right? And so that for me is a big lesson that I'm learning right now. And this is sort of the power of the dialectic, right? Is understanding, okay, how can I think in such a way or program my mind that I'm having a narrative evolution that might work in line with the external progression that I want to see, but is also ultimately in alignment with my own personal progress. And you might ask, well, what's the point of the progress, right? Because here, the external line is having a home at the bottom, and then after that, power, kingdoms, whatever you want. But then over here, what is it exactly we're trying to do, right? And this is where knowing what it is you're trying to do can be very careful. And this is where having fundamental questions answered are super important. So this is just some things I want to ask you, because I think by answering these questions, you can come to a better example of what it is that's important. Oh, I need to clean this board. So I'm going to do that afterwards. But so the first question I'd like to ask is, what does the best, and I'm going to use this word best here because that's really important, best version of you look like? That's a really important question to ask yourself, right? Because instinctively, I would say inside of us, we're all driven towards this best version of ourselves, right? If we're asking the question. Oftentimes, the indicator of our drive to live is going to be based off of this, especially when we're out of survival mode. And then I'm going to ask you, what does the most loving version of you look like? And this is the big one. What's the difference? That's question number 3. What is the difference? Because if you were to ask me, Oni, what is your teaching? What is it you think? For me, the fundamental things we're shooting for in life is that life is trying to turn us into the most loving version of ourselves. Everything in life is ultimately trying to just turn you into the most loving version of yourself. I believe that is the intent of the universe. So if you were to ask me, if you're on my channel seeking advice or asking me, what is it I'm trying to do? What I'm saying is everything that is presented to you in life is the intent is to turn you into the most loving version of yourself. Now, if you have the idea of a best version of yourself and a loving version of yourself, and there's a difference, that difference is the gap where your misunderstanding lies. And that gap is where the tension will happen. So the larger that gap, the larger the difference between what the best version of you looks like and the most loving version of you, that will create the amount more tension. And that tension will disturb your peace. Because if these are aligned, what is the most loving version of yourself and the best version of yourself, so your values are in line to give you love, what will naturally result from that is peace. And then obviously love, and then joy. And if there is a difference, recognize the gap of misunderstanding, that tension is the difference. And so as you examine whatever aspect you're feeling tension about, the best version of you versus the most loving version of you, as we look within that narrative aspect, that is the part of yourself that, when given focus and when refined, will bridge this gap release the tension, and ultimately you'll be seeing that version of your most loving version come out. Even now, asking myself these questions, one of the things I'm noticing within myself is that my sense of self-preservation, so my sense of self-preservation and my sense of importance are probably the areas where I need to focus on. Because for me, the most loving version of myself and the best version of myself, the gap I see between here and here is probably this one thinks about himself less but does more for himself, right? And this one thinks about himself probably a bit more, but doesn't really act out on it. Actually, I would say that's the best version of himself. I don't know. I can sense the difference, and I can sense the differences here, but I can't even really put it out. So I'm going to actually ask myself these questions and hit you guys up with it as well, because I think that would be something good to do. Because I'm starting to feel it right here. So I'm actually going to jump in and do that. But these are some questions I want to leave you guys with to ultimately think about the paradox and dialectic of life. 3 questions to change your life. That's what we'll call the video. 3 questions to change your life. And so hopefully that makes sense and you'll be able to get down to it. Appreciate your patience. Stay happy, stay healthy. Oh, like and subscribe if any of this is helpful. And if you need help applying any of these principles, look down in the description below and you can sign me up for a session or join my training program where I teach you, I have a full comprehensive program to help people integrate these elements into your life. Anyway, hope all is well. Stay happy, stay healthy. Peace. And